Brian Fitzpatrick was introduced to me by an old friend of mine, old colleague of mine, and he said, you have to listen to this guy. He's such a good speaker and he has such an interesting topic. So without further introduction, Brian, welcome to Eclipse Talk.
Thank you very much. Okay. Can everyone hear me well in the back? People way, way in the back? Working on your presentations? I know I've done that before. It's really great to be here. First of all, thank you for having me. Thank you for coming. I'm really excited to be here to talk to you about something completely non-technical, but something that's really important. My first manager at Google said this quote, and I couldn't possibly agree more with him. Most people I know spend 4, 6, 8, 10 years studying computer science, studying the art of writing software. Most people I know also spend about 2 minutes studying the art of working with other people. And I think that's really important. My colleague, Ben Collins Sussman, and I started talking about the human element of software engineering back in 2006. And it was such a huge attractor. It was sort of like, it sort of turned into like a group therapy people. Everybody like, yeah, I know that guy. That terrible jerk did something to me. We were using examples of people who are, or we called poisonous people. And we developed this into a book that we called Team Geek. And so if you're wondering, why are you, Brian Fitzpatrick, qualified to get up here and talk about this? Well, I've written this book with my colleague, Ben, Software Developer's Guide to Working with Others, or as I like to say, I teach geeks how to talk to human beings. You know, you guys know the joke, right? How can you tell when an engineer is outgoing? They look at your shoes. They don't get any better than this. This is the jokes, people. So does that make me qualified to talk to you about the human element of software engineering? I'll let you on a little secret, it doesn't. I want to give you a very brief disclaimer. One is that these are subjective opinions. There are many, many ways of writing software. There are fewer ways, I would say, of writing software where you spend more time writing software. How many people in the room write software all by themselves? Never work with anyone else? See me afterwards. No, I'm just kidding. My point being, that's 1 out of 500. So we're at 0.25% or less of the population. So most of us are working with other people. So the other part of the disclaimer is that this doesn't always apply if you are a moron or if you're working with morons. So if you're in a very toxic environment, this might not work out so well for you. So be careful. But why should you care? Why should you care about people? You're focused on software. You're focused on code. If you're an excellent engineer, why should you care? This is why you should care. Maybe if you're really, really strong, you could pull this nail out with your fingers. Or you could just grab a pliers and put your foot on the board and yank it and pull it out. Both ways of doing it. Or you could just use a hammer, claw, and lever it right out. Very easy, accomplishes the same end. Many of you drive a car, I would imagine, or have driven a car. The car is a complex piece of machinery. It's made up out of a whole lot of different moving parts, metal on metal. And you could probably start the car and run it for a bit without any oil. But pretty shortly, your car would look a lot more like this. But if you add just a little bit of oil, your car will function quite well for quite a bit of time. Now, again, we're talking about development engineers. You write code. You could certainly write code using VI or Emacs or, God forbid, Notepad, Windows Notepad. I met a person writing code with Windows Notepad, and I wept. Or you could use an IDE. I don't know. Anybody know any good IDEs around here? Hey, pandering is totally on something you should try out once in a while. So you might think, we're 5 minutes into this talk, and I'm beating a dead horse. Well, I'm going to beat it some more now. I could get up here and simply put up slides full of text and a white paper and a few graphs, maybe another graph, and I could be very boring and dry and monotone. Or I could tell you stories. I could use pictures. I can use ridiculous hyperbole. These things are my oil to help you not fall asleep or drift off into working on your presentation for tomorrow. So, what about writing software? Let's talk about it like this. Most people, when faced with human issues, because remember, people are hard. Human beings are nothing but a collection of intermittent bugs. I might walk into work today and see you and be like, good morning. And you'll say, good morning, Fitz, how are you? And I come in tomorrow and I say, good morning. You say, go to hell. I was up all night. People are unpredictable. So most engineers, in face of this unpredictability, go heads down. Write software. I'm just going to focus on writing code. In fact, I'm going to write great code. The problem is that in and of itself, great code is simply an artistic endeavor. Your real job as an engineer, 99.9% of the time, is to ship product. Now, if you take a little bit of oil and you apply it to the human element of your software, you can make things go more easily. Individual people, without working closely with others, become single points of failure. This is also a thing I'll talk about later called the bus factor. But if you use multiple safety measures, if you oil, you get your team talking, you get people working together, you can be this guy who wears suspenders and a belt, because you just don't ever know. But if you oil your team a little bit, you can keep them from burning out. And you can focus on something, on what's important. You can write more code. You get to ship more product. And all it takes is a tiny, tiny little bit of oil. Most engineers I know, if I asked them what they did, they would say, oh, something like this. I probably spend most of the time writing code. I fix some bugs, design. I go to these terrible meetings that suck the life out of me. What do they really do? It looks a lot more like this. This is why you should care. Because most engineers I know would rather do this. And if you can do this with just that little bit of oil, you get to write all the more code. So there's three pillars that I base human interactions on. Three general foundations. People can talk about very high-level things. They can talk about all sorts of abstract concepts and why people work together well or why they don't work together well. But it comes down to three things. Humility, respect, and trust. Any dysfunction in a team will boil down to a lack of some part of one or two, or even all of these things, or some of them are missing entirely. So to help remember these things, Ben and I like to use a mnemonic. We call it HEART, right? Humility, respect, and trust. That helps us remember these things. But again, we're going to come back to this a few times in the talk, but this is really important. So, three parts of this talk. The first thing I'm going to, in addition to the one I just went on and on about, but most importantly is you. We're going to talk a little bit about how you work, and some things that, due to human nature, bad habits people tend to have. We'll focus on your team, and specifically team culture. And lastly, we'll talk about your company, and how to work inside of a bigger company. So without further ado, you. There's a desire by everyone, and I confess to having this desire too, to be seen as smart in the programming community. I'd love to be known as that clever guy who wrote that great bit of code, as someone who has witty banter when he's writing emails back and forth. And this is okay, but the reasoning behind this is interesting. There's a lot of bad artifacts that can come out of this. Most people I know have some sort of idol. A famous politician, Or First Lady, for example, Michelle Obama, one of my favorite examples. She wore this dress to the inauguration. The next day, every store sold out of it. Famous athletes are put on the covers of cereal boxes, and cereal sales go up. If you eat that cereal, are you really going to play sports like that person is? Probably not. In fact, they probably don't even eat the cereal. That's sort of the secret, I guess. But these people are idolized, much like engineers have their own heroes. It may be Linus Torvalds, it may be Guido van Rossum, Kernighan, Pike, Bill Joy, whoever it is, you name it. All these people are mythologized, and they get all this credit, even though in most cases they don't deserve it all. Certainly they've done great things. Certainly Linus started a project that became Linux, but did he create it? No. He was the seed. He's the leader. So people see these idols, and they want to be like them. So the first thing you do is the ultimate geek fantasy. You go into your bat cave, and you work, and you tinker, and then you come out, and you're going to shock the world with your brilliant new invention. Everyone secretly wishes to be seen as that genius. Fear of showing, how did I know? Because I suffer from this affliction too. But there's a fear of showing any mistake ever. A fear of seeing vulnerable, that desire to be clever or smart. Well, I'm here to tell you, right here in Ludwigsburg, that there is no genius. The number of geniuses in the world, true geniuses, are very, very small. And I've had the opportunity to meet a couple of them, and I'm kind of blown away. But in many cases, it's a cargo cult kind of a thing. You're trying to imitate certain behaviors of geniuses. And this is to deal with a number of different things. Again, it's human nature. This isn't any individual. Insecurity. There's the fear of showing mistakes. But people will say, well, what's the big deal about this? Why is this a problem? I can go off and work on my own, and I'll just bring the code when I'm done. Well, simply put, it inhibits progress. The old saying, many eyes make all bugs shallow. When you're working on something and not sharing it with anyone, you have a bus factor of 1. Who here has heard of the bus factor before? Wow, it's getting out there. This is great. So for the rest of you, the bus factor is the number of people in your project who have to get hit by a bus that will leave you in a world of shit. Most projects, that bus factor is 1. And again, it's not always an actual bus. People can quit, they can leave, they can have a kid, they can do any number of things that will affect the amount of time they spend working with you. But it really does inhibit progress. It affects code quality. I would assume most people in this room use a compiler. How many people write, 10,000 lines of code and then press compile? Anybody? Most people I know write a little bit of code, compile, write a little code, compile. The same thing goes for working with people, getting other people to look at your stuff. You need a feedback loop with other humans on your team. If you write 10,000 lines of code, but it's the wrong code, it doesn't matter that you've been off in la-la land writing it very quickly. So just to stress, this is one of my favorite quotes from the movie Fight Club, which you're not supposed to talk, so I won't read it. But this is very, very important stuff. Even if you are a genius, working with others will make or break you. Like attracts like. Software development is inherently a collaborative process. So how do you avoid the trap? The first thing is lose the ego. And what I mean by that is the individual ego. Go for a collective project ego. The most successful teams I know have smart people on them who work really hard, but they're willing to accept that they make mistakes and failures and get criticism from the other people in their team. But as a team, they're very proud of their work. They work together. They have a strong identity. So just to be clear, you don't want to be this guy. Again, when it comes back to humility, respect, and trust, this is really the humility component of it. If you don't show some humility, the one thing I've learned the hard way is that someone will show it to you. Usually in the form of an entire, what we call a humble pie, served to you without even being cut. It's very hard to swallow that sort of a thing. But remember that criticism isn't a bad thing. It's something to be given politely, it's something to be given constructively, and it's also something to be received politely. Criticism is a way of someone helping you make yourself better. Again, you are not your code. Your code is an artifact. It's something you've created. You should always be striving to make it better. And if you don't listen to criticism, it's never going to get better. Failure is also important. I talked about mistakes. Failure is an option. My favorite story, and I researched this greatly and could not find out where it's from. If anyone knows the true origin of it, let me know. There was an executive. It's attributed to IBM, but it's not IBM from what I found out. An executive made a mistake, and he lost $10 million. He came into work the next day and started packing up his desk. His secretary buzzed him and said, "Sir, the CEO would like to see you." So he picked up his resignation letter. He walked into the CEO's office. He placed the letter on the desk, and he pushed it over. The CEO picked it up and said, "What's this?" He said, "It's my resignation letter." The CEO said, "Why?" He said, "Well, I assumed you called me in here to fire me." He said, "Fire you? Yeah, I just spent $10 million training you. Why would I fire you?" Try and fail quickly. Not a $10 million failure. A little dollar failure. Maybe a €10 failure. 10 euros, what, like $700 now or something? Failing fast helps you to iterate quickly. Don't erase your tracks. Don't erase your mistakes. When you fail, document it. Otherwise, someone's going to come along a year, and either they're going to fail doing the same thing, or they're going to waste your team's time trying to do the same thing. But practice really is important. It makes this iteration cycle move a lot faster. The baseline of your sort of try-fail graph goes upwards, so your failures are smaller. But remember, mistakes are okay, and part of making mistakes is being a small fish. When you are the most senior person on the team or the most senior person in the room, it can be a lot of fun for a while, but you're probably not improving your skills. Instead, you're helping the more junior people on your team improve your skills. So look for a bigger aquarium or an ocean, something like that. An interesting thing about influence, the people who I know are the most influential are actually the most open to influence from other people. People who are influential, who seem influential, who are not open to influence, don't tend to be influential. They tend to be sort of figureheads or something like that, or they don't maintain their influence for very long because people tire of that sort of an attitude. And that leads me to vulnerability, which is the last part of this section. Repeated vulnerability, interestingly enough, is perceived as strength over the long term. The inability to be vulnerable means that you can't compromise, and if you can't compromise, it makes it really hard to work with other people. So this covers the you component, right? These are general human behaviors that people have because we're all descended from apes living in the trees or something like that. What about team? What about the other people that you have to see every day at work? It can be really hard to work with other people. Like I said, humans are piles of intermittent bugs. A team culture is one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. If anyone's ever worked in a team where you've just got a great culture, where you're excited to work with people, you feel like you're heard, you're valued, it's really amazing. People often want to know, well, how can I make my team better? How can I build a good team? It's a lot like making a loaf of bread. Now, you can go to the store and just buy some yeast and make a loaf of bread, but if you want a loaf of really good bread, and gosh, I love coming to Europe because you guys know how to make bread here. The closest you can come to real bread in the U.S., I would say, is like a sourdough bread out of San Francisco, where they take this yeast starter that they've sort of found over the course of the years and refined, and they always save a little bit, and then they grow it into another bigger colony. And they take this yeast, and then they inoculate the loaf of bread with that. So it's like you take the sourdough starter here, which is your founders, the people that start your team. And remember, everyone's responsible for culture. It's not just your manager. It's not just your technical lead. So you take your founders, you take a spoonful of them, and you drop them in the team, and you stir them around really well. And if they have a strong culture, they'll overtake any small wild strains of weird culture in there. Things you don't know, things that are unknown, things that are in many cases undesirable. If it's a strong culture, and it's vulnerable, and it's open to influence, it may find some wild strains in there, and it may take the good ones and incorporate them in itself. So you mix this up, put it in the oven, cook it for 45 minutes or whatever, and you wind up with a nice freshly baked loaf of team. But this is your culture. Your culture is an artifact of the first people on your team. If you look at the Eclipse and committers to Eclipse, a lot of the culture that's formed around Eclipse is an artifact of the first dozen or so people that worked on it. They set the stage. Like attracts like. If a team starts and it's started by somebody who's very aggressive and chest thumping and sort of sometimes a jerk, and I won't mention any names like Linux, what you wind up with is a whole group of people who do a lot of yelling and screaming. I advocate for a consensus-based culture. Now, when I say consensus, a lot of people tune out. They say, oh, here's that hippie free love crap. We're all going to sit around and sing Kumbaya, and things are going to go very slowly, and we can't make decisions. But it's not about that. It's about ownership. It's not about this sort of hippie free love thing. It makes a culture where everyone has a strong sense of ownership. Everyone feels responsibility for the product's success, and the leaders really listen to the team. And it may be that if you need to move faster, the culture will trust the leader and delegate decision-making to them for a while as a way to move faster. That is still a consensus-driven culture, but it's one where everybody has ownership. Responsibility is an important component of that. And when coming back to humility, respect, and trust, respect for your peers, along with the humility, is one of the primary components of working with the rest of your team. If you work with people you don't respect, it's super hard to collaborate with them. Now, a few other elements of culture I want to mention is that to be direct does not mean you have to be a jerk. This has been said a number of times. There's been a lot of, earlier this year, I think, discussions going around Twitter and other places about people who are being a jerk or something or other. Being direct or being a leader is not an excuse to be abusive to other people. Period, ever, the end. Unfortunately, there's this sort of cargo cult, this idolatry that goes on. A lot of people see Steve Jobs, and he was incredibly successful, but he was a complete ass. He was a complete jerk. I worked at Apple for 3.5 years, and I saw him coming, and I walked the other way. I knew people who worked in his building who would take the stairs because they were horrified of getting stuck in an elevator with him. But people see this and they say, this man was a jerk and he was very successful, therefore I will be a jerk and I will be very successful. You're much like the Pacific Islanders during World War II, where these planes came and dropped off all this supplies, and so they built towers out of bamboo and runways, and they put fake headphones on out of coconuts, and they waited for the planes to come. It's a cargo cult. That does not make a culture. You can be direct. Aggression is bad. If you have an aggressive culture, what solution are you going to wind up with? You're going to wind up with a solution that is advocated by the most aggressive people in the room. You're not going to hear the solution from what might be the best solution. This is incredibly toxic beyond that to introverts. It's very hard for introverts to succeed in an environment like this. And because cultures are self-selecting, they either won't come or they'll leave. This alienates valuable opinions. You can't afford to do that. Engineers, developers, user interface people that write software are incredibly in demand. You guys are sitting in a place today where it's just, most of the world would just die to be sitting where we are. This leads me to poisonous people, which is sort of the last part of the team section. Poisonous people distract and emotionally drain your community. Now, it may not be that it's the individual. In many cases, it's just behaviors. It causes needless infighting. It's going to be a lack of humility, respect, or trust. Or all three of those things. But you really need to work to make sure that these people don't take over your community, that they don't rout out the rest of your committers, because in many cases, if you let them take over, they'll scare people off. Sometimes people welcome poisonous people into their community because they're known, they may be slightly famous, they may be very smart, they may write lots of code, and I guarantee you in the long term, it's never worth it. because it will turn your culture inside out. I met Tony Hsieh, who is the CEO of Zappos, and I asked him, what's the most important part of Zappos? And when people talk to me, they say, what's the best thing about working for Google? I'll often say, it's the people. I love the people I get to work with. I'm very honored to be working there. Tony didn't say people. Tony shocked me. He said it's the culture. He said culture is number one. Keeping our culture is the most important thing. And that is the people are a close second, but we wouldn't hire somebody that would basically compromise our culture. So that's your team. Now let's talk about something trickier. How many people here work inside of a larger company? One smaller team and a larger company? Okay. You're gonna like this, I think. The rest of you can go back to your laptops. No, I'm kidding. So some people will call this section politics. I like to call it organizational manipulation. When people think of a place that they'd like to work, they think of the perfect company, a very calm, ideal, sort of relaxing environment to work in. Something that's beautiful, a company that's well put together. Unfortunately, most companies look more like this. This is the reality. You have managers. Right. I'm going to need that by Saturday. Managers that are too conservative, that don't want you to take risks, that are afraid of failure, and in true fashion, you always walk right, you become your greatest fears. And if you're afraid of failure, you're pretty much guaranteed to fail. They think you serve them, right? They will take credit when something good happens, and they will push blame out when something bad happens. They will not deal with low performers. If anyone's ever been in a team where there's that one person who's over there reading Reddit all day long and not committing any code, and everybody's wondering, why didn't that guy get fired? Well, first of all, the person's never going to quit, because why would I quit? I'm just getting paid to sit here and do nothing. Second of all, your good people will usually leave first because they have the most options. So, bad managers, very scary. Now, this is where I point out that in the company, now we're reaching further out. Now we're talking more about trust. But I want to warn you about this guy. There's one everywhere. He doesn't always wear a light blue tie like this, but they tend to be very friendly. They're great at managing up, and they're great at getting to know people and getting to know what's going on. They're very quick to take credit. They're very quick to place blame, much like the manager I was talking about. These kind of people put a great deal of energy into looking impactful, but very little energy into being impactful. The instinct is to just avoid them and go heads down and write great code. That is a very dangerous thing to do. It's a very good way to wind up working for this guy. So be wary of this person. Steer around them. Just be very careful. A lot of you probably know just who I'm talking about. So, all right. How do we manipulate the organization? How do we get things done in a company that's bigger than our team? My favorite one, Grace Hopper. Anyone ever seen Grace Hopper's talk on nanoseconds? I am the biggest Grace Hopper fan. The woman was amazing. If you've never seen it, you owe yourself, after this is over, to go and watch that video. This quote is from her. Beg for forgiveness, not permit for permission. But this means know what you can get away with in your company. And is this the right thing? And if it is, then do it. Most people I know will go and they want to do something, and they'll go and they'll ask permission. Can I do this? And you'll say, oh, yeah, I don't care. And then they'll go to someone else in authority and say, can I do this? And then if all 20 people say yes, which is incredibly unusual, they get to do it. And then they don't have to take responsibility if it goes sideways. But I can guarantee you that one of those people will say no, because you're looking for someone to push blame off. If it's the right thing to do, and you feel like you can get away with it, you should go ahead and do it. Most executives I know, when faced with an idea or someone asks, can I do something, they don't evaluate, is this a good idea? Most executives that I know can't tell if it's a good idea, and they've got a million other things going on, but their job is to make a decision. So what they evaluate on is this. Can this be easily undone? Is it going to take a short period of time and can be easily undone? Knock yourself out. Have a great day. Are you trying to, launch some product that we can't easily unlaunch? Let's talk about this a little more. Let's think about it a bit more. Remember that in many cases you can control the result or the means to get to the result, but not necessarily both. And so focus on the results. That is not a license to be unethical, but focus on the results. Focus on what your real goal is, and take responsibility when you're doing the right thing. Now I want to talk briefly about a whole economy that runs inside of in any industry. It's bigger than an individual company, which is the cool thing about it. So if you leave a company, you don't lose all of your filthy lucre, so to speak. But the favor economy is one that involves karma. Karma is a good word for it. When you leave a company, some people I know have burned bridges. They go out this huge flame of glory, and then that just burns their karma bank down to the ground. But this is a way of getting things done. I do a favor for you. Maybe at some point later you do a favor for me. It's not like you're keeping track. It's not a, hey, I know, I did this for you. I want you to do this for me. It's just like making little investments that some of them will pay off and some of them won't. But the most important thing to remember is that it feels good to do things for people. It really does feel good to be nice, especially if it takes you a few minutes and it would have taken them an hour. But the second part of that is that, remember, friends may come and go, but enemies accumulate, and they will follow you for the rest of your lives. So look for opportunities to help. Build up trust and karma across departments. And remember that if you leave the company, all these people will still remember that you were that good guy that did those things for them. So it's not like this goes away, unless you burn your bridges, in which case it goes away. And there's lots of different ways you can do this. So Ben and I were approached by recruiting to do a video to help them do some recruiting videos. And we said, we're really busy, but, we can put together like three or four of them in an hour. Tell us what you want. We sat down. We put on silly lab coats. We made a couple fun videos. And we did these for these guys. Did we have to? No. Was it easy? Yes. Did it super help us 6 months later when we needed to start hiring faster in our office? Absolutely. Every recruiter knew who we were and was glad to do us a favor. So look for ways you can leverage the favor economy. Do not step in front of every train. Most engineers I know, and I've done this before, love to step in front of trains. Hey, here comes a train. There's that mail thread where someone's trying to make a decision. Let me jump in front of it. Stop. I disagree with that. It's wrong. Even if it doesn't matter. They're going to argue something because they know something about it, or they don't agree with it. Every time you step in front of a train, the engineer on the train has to put on the brakes and slow down. And that's going to cost you a little bit of karma with them. You know what happens when you run out of karma? They stop putting the brakes on. You just run right over you. Not even kidding. And the second part of this is, if you're standing in front of trains all day, what the hell else are you doing? This takes away from that whole writing code time that I talked about. Know what trains matter and choose carefully. Always think before jumping in front of a train. Destruction is difficult. Replacing is quite simple. Anyone who's ever quit smoking knows this. I've quit smoking, 17 years ago, and I replaced it with eating, and I gained 70 pounds. Yay! Habits in the company, especially bad habits, are very hard to simply destroy. A lot easier to replace. I had a team that I took over, and they had this daily stand-up meeting, which involved sitting around drinking coffee and shooting the shit for 30 minutes, or 40, maybe 50. And I sat in this a few times, and I'm like, we got to get rid of this. And I canceled it. And people threw a huge fit. I don't know what so-and-so's working. It's a way of getting to know each other, blah, 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 blah. And it went on for quite a while until I handed off the team to my colleague, Ben. And he came to me after a week. He's like, what's with this meeting? This isn't a meeting. This is some sort of like a group therapy session. I said, well, I tried to get rid of it. And so he said, I know what to do. He emailed the team. He says, we're going to try something for 3 weeks. Magic word, try. 3 weeks. This is very not so scary. This is just going to try this for 3 weeks, then we can go back. No more meeting every morning. I blocked the conference room for something else. What I want everyone to do is mail the entire team with 3 things you're going to be doing that day and 1 thing that's blocking you. And he set up a little automated nag email that went out every morning. And if that didn't work, he would personally nag people. And after 2 weeks, everybody forgot it was temporary. He successfully replaced that meeting. This works in many, many situations. Find something to replace a habit. Find a safe place in a company. That may mean that you find a different group, a different department. That may just mean that you climb the corporate ladder and get promoted to a point where fewer people can bug you or tell you what to do. And this is, back to the office politician who spends all their time looking impactful. This is another suggestion, is that spending a small percentage of your time looking impactful is worth it. And I've seen this on a team level where someone will we're going to take 6 months and work on infrastructure and just make the product more robust. We're going to clean up the code. We're going to do all these OCD things that obsessive compulsive like me love to do. Everything will be perfect, neat, and we'll lay it out just right. Problem is that none of the rest of the world can see this. There's no visible features. It's visible only to you and your team. So spending a majority of your time doing something like this is done at your own peril. Influential people are another way of sort of getting things done in a big company. I have this lovely picture of Vint. If you ever get to meet Vint, take the opportunity. He is one of the nicest people I've met in the world, and he only wears 3-piece suits, which is awesome. I asked him why. He says that he only has shorts and T-shirts and 3-piece suits, and his wife won't let him garden in a 3-piece suit. Vint has been around the internet for a very long time. He's known as the grandfather of the internet. He's been around Google for a long time. He's very influential. Seek his opinion, talk to him about things, bounce things off of him. Maybe he'll help you out. So getting to know these people, and I'm not saying to do it in a sort of networking, slimy, hey kind of way, but be wary that these people serve this type of influential person serves a valuable role in a company. There's also connectors, people who connect you to other people. There are organizations that connect you to other people. There are events that connect you to other people. I've talked to some folks in the bar last night who were saying that, they love coming to EclipseCon not only because it's a great conference, but they get to see what they call their conference family. They get to see friends that they only get to see in person once a year. And this is a conference, as a community, connects people. This is very valuable. So these are all positive things. Find a safe place. Find influential people. Find connectors. Now, I'll give you a big warning. Do not ever mess with administrative assistants. Many people think that administrative assistants are just somebody at a typewriter making calendar reservations and typing stuff up. It's more like this person, and if you screw with them, they will cut you. So there are 2 organizational charts in a company. The organizational chart that's published, and then the one that power flows through. Power flows through administrative assistants. They're overworked, underpaid, and they're usually really good people. It will serve you well to be nice to them. And there was a book that a guy wrote, and I can't remember the name of it, but he was a CEO, and whenever he would hire a new executive, before he would give them an offer, he'd go out to lunch with them, and he would carefully watch how they treated the waitstaff. And if they were abusive to people who were not in a position of power over them, he would never hire them, because he said that if you treat someone poorly like that, you're just a bad person. And I don't think he's quite far off. Okay, buy an airplane. No, I'm kidding. Get on an airplane. We work in a world of telecommuting, internet chat, a million different ways for people to work remotely. There is nothing. There is no 3D, high-definition, smell-o-vision video conferencing system anywhere that can replace being there with someone. Because with these video conferencing systems, first of all, there's less fidelity, but most importantly, you miss out on meeting people as you're coming into the room, finishing up the meeting, catching that senior vice president and walking with them to their next meeting so you can have a few minutes with them. Pace time is important. There's a reason that companies invest in creating an office space and building a community. Sometimes that means, taking people out to dinner. Sometimes it means giving them a free lunch. The value you get from that is that you get to know people outside of your rigorous work. You get to know them as human beings. So if I spend a few minutes and I go out and I grab a drink with someone after work one day, and I find out they got 3 kids and their wife's sick, 2 days from now when they send me this one-line email at 2 in the morning, that I could be like, oh my God, what a jerk. I might give them a little more slack. Oh, Steve's a good guy. Clearly, there's something we need to work on here. So get on an airplane. Don't be penny wise and pound foolish. The last part of the company section is one of my favorite tips and tricks. I love to tell this story because it's incredibly effective, in my opinion, and it's not just for executives. You can feel free to use this on anyone working at the Eclipse Foundation if you don't work there. You have my permission. I got the microphone. Usually when someone's emailing or contacting someone in their company who's like 2, 3, 4 levels up the chain, it's because there's some egregious injustice has happened. Something terrible has gone wrong. And so what do? They feel like, we need to fix this. This is my chance to talk to this person, to let them know everything that's wrong in the world. And they sit down, they press the caps lock key, they pop the return key off, and they start typing. And 3,000 words later, they press send. And then, if anyone's ever looked at the inbox of a busy executive, let me tell you what it looks like. It is a distributed denial of service attack. There is shit coming in so fast that they can barely, if at all, keep up. So they'll see your mail, they will read for about 4 seconds, they will see this wall of text, they will press delete, they will move on to the next message. You rant forever. So this is a technique that I call simply 3 bullet points and a call to action. That's what you get for your mail. It is massively simple. It is incredibly obvious. It will, however, not necessarily get you something crazy. But I stumbled upon this technique courtesy of a friend when I worked at Apple back in early 2000. I bought my mother one of those colorful raspberry iMacs. It could have been yellow because it was a lemon, and it wound up in the shop like every 3 weeks. And I was so frustrated, and I was so embarrassed because my mom was like, you gave me this computer and it's falling apart. Like, what's going on? And so I sat down and I wrote Steve Jobs, caps lock, return key off. And before I hit send, I said, I'm going to send this to a couple of my friends I work with so they can get a chuckle out of this. I'm going to really show them what's going on here. And I sent it to him, and one of them was really kind enough to write you back and say, this is pretty funny, but Steve's never going to read this. He's just going to delete it. You need to give him just a couple bullet points and then really let him know immediately what you want. Because if he can comprehend it in 5 or 6 seconds and see that it's something unjust, people in power really love to do things. It makes them feel good. Come back to that doing things for other people. It's a little deposit in their karma bank, right? And they don't have to do anything except press forward to minion number 1, make this happen, fix this. And they do that. And so I did this. I wrote this little 3 bullet point line email and to Steve, and I sent it off, and 14 hours later, I got a call from one of his minions. He didn't say, hi, this is Steve's minion. He said, I'm so-and-so from Corporate Executive Relations, and I'd like to help you out. Steve told me that you're having a problem. 2 weeks later, my mother had a brand new iMac. And I said, this is amazing. I have a superpower. I'm going to use this for good. And I've refined it over the years. And in fact, when Ben and I wrote the book, I went and dug up this email, and Ben and I rewrote it to be more concise, to really remove some of the emotion and things I'd let in. And we put that alongside that other email for people to check out. So this is very valuable. Now the cool thing about this is this will work with just about anybody. It's an incredibly effective way of communicating with someone who is busy. It enables them to send, if you can try and find out a way for them to either forward it or answer your question with a yes or no answer, you're more likely to get a response. There's one bad side about this. After Ben and I published the book, we started getting emails from people formatted like this. Normally, I would have ignored your email because it's some long, rambling rant that had no point, but it suddenly had a very easy-to-read point. And I told people to do this, so I felt obliged to respond. So I'm always excited when I get an email like this from people, really. So let's wrap up the company section. What if all this doesn't work? Like I said, Ben and I have been giving these talks since 2006, and after almost every talk, someone would come up to us and say, you know, I've tried a lot of these things. I've done this. How do you think I can get this fixed in my company? I'm just some lowly dude and really would like to see things work out great. And I said, well, you know, if you can't do anything, you really have to go to Plan B if nothing else has worked. And Plan B has 4 separate steps. So I'm going to go through them one at a time. And those steps are, get the hell out. If it doesn't work, don't keep pouring energy into something that's just not working. And again, like I said, in the world of software engineering, we've got a great opportunity in that we're in demand. There's way more engineering work out there than there are engineers in many cases. That's not the case for a lot of industries. So prep your resume. Train some new skills. Go start hunting for jobs. One guy I had told this to after a conference several years ago wrote me a year later and said, I thought you were a jerk for telling me to get the fuck out of my job, which is what I told him. He said, I thought you were kind of a jerk. He's like, but I went home, and after I sulked a bit, I thought about it. And I prepped my resume. I took some product management classes, and I'm moving to Tokyo from Venezuela in 2 weeks for my dream job. And I was like, cool, I'm going to try this again. I found another superpower. This is great. So, back to what all this is about. It's about spending more time writing code. It's about spending more time shipping product and less time with what I call heat and light, waste energy, arguing and violent disagreement and back and forth and drama and emotion. Disagreeing and criticism and all is all very valuable, but when it's a lot of heat and light, it's wasteful. So just a drop of oil in a crowd of people and a little bit of humility, respect, and trust on top of all of that will help you deal with single points of failure. It'll increase your buzz factor, and it makes just for generally a better environment to work, one that attracts more people. And if all else fails, you can always spend a little time beating a dead horse. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.